Hello, and welcome to Sunday at Bear Branch, a virtual ministry of the Churches of Christ.
To continue speaking this morning on the subject of God's messengers, His divine messengers, the angelic host, as we think of them, in the realm that is unseen and sometimes in the realm which is seen. What I thought I would do for a little while today is I want to look at some situations, at least a couple of them, that's in the Old Testament where we see God making use of these ministering spirits to help bring about His will. If you would, and you're following with us, you can open to 2 Kings, the 2nd chapter. And there we find Elijah and Elisha being confronted by some of the false prophets of that time, or going to confront them. And when we come into the the 2nd chapter, verse 5, says, "And the sons of the prophets that were at Jericho came to Elisha and said unto him, Knowest thou that the Lord will take away thy master from thy head today? And he answered, Yea, I know it. Hold ye your peace. And Elijah said unto him, Tarry, I pray thee here, for the Lord hath sent me to Jordan. And he," that is Elisha, "said, As the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee." And they too went on. Being a prophet of old was a dangerous occupation. And when people didn't like the things that you were saying, it became extremely dangerous. And Elijah was looking out for his disciple, the one who would ultimately replace him, Elisha, and he wanted him to stay back and to tarry. He knew he was coming into difficult circumstances, and he didn't want the younger disciple of his to be exposed to the dangers that he was facing against the false teachers and those who were out to get him. And Elisha makes the determination that as the Lord lives, as my soul lives, as we are alive, he makes in essence a pact saying, I will not leave you nor your side. We're, to kind of paraphrase it, he's saying we're in this together. However it turns out, wherever you go, whatever happens, I'm going to be there right with you. And 50 men of the sons of the prophets went and stood to view afar off, and they too, TWO, stood by Jordan. And Elijah took his mantle and wrapped it together and smote the waters, and they were divided hither and thither, so that they too went over on dry ground. Here's another one of those situations that we find in the Scriptures where the Jordan River was parted, a miracle which was done so that Elijah and Elisha could cross over the Jordan to where God was sending them to. Now, just as a side note, it's not a miracle if it's not a miracle. I don't know about you, but I doubt very seriously that Elijah's mantle, his coat, his cloak, when he wrapped it around his arms and smacked the water, sucked up all the water out of Jordan. I doubt very seriously that his mantle had the ability to suck up all the water, though the world would try to explain why that might be. But we see the miraculous powers of God working. The question sometimes we ask, and we might wonder, is how does that exactly happen? Did God directly get involved? Did He do it Himself, or did somebody else do it? Well, sometimes we know, sometimes we don't. But in verse 9 it says, "And it came to pass, when they were gone over, that Elijah said unto Elisha, Ask what I shall do for thee before I be taken away from thee. And Elisha said, I pray thee, let a double portion of thy spirit be upon me. And he said, Thou hast asked a hard thing, nevertheless, if thou see me when I am taken away, it shall be so unto thee. But if not, it shall not be so. And it came to pass, as they went on and talked, that behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, and parted them both asunder. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind, and Elisha saw it, and cried, my father, the chariot of Israel, and the horsemen thereof, and he saw him no more." On that realm, or in that realm, here we have defined those that Elisha refers to as the horsemen of Israel. These horsemen of Israel were carrying away his teacher, Elisha, up into heaven. These are part of the things which are seen and the things which are not seen. And so as we look at this and as we think about that, we can see Elijah wasn't taken up in a literal chariot pulled by a couple of riders out of the nation of Israel up into the sky. We know that's not what happens. And so God allowed Elisha to see the carrying away of Elijah, that he was taken up into heaven. Now, what happened and all the things, it's a lot like when we think about Enoch. Enoch, we're told, walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. And we don't know the mechanics necessarily of how he took him. But here we clearly see that Elijah was carried up into heaven through the means of this chariot, this fiery chariot of God, through the horsemen of God. Now, nowhere in here does it specifically say these are angels, but these are part of the ministering spirits that carried him away into heaven. And this same Elijah is the Elijah that we see with Jesus, standing with Moses in the book of Matthew chapter 17. We find there that there appeared with Jesus Moses and Elijah. Now, where Elijah had been from the time that he was taken up into heaven with this fiery chariot till the time that he shows up on the Mount of Transfiguration, we don't have a lot of information to go on. But we do see this concept, this vision, this thought. In the book of Luke, when we're talking about Lazarus and the rich man, an account that we read about from time to time, where we find Lazarus, who was laying there with sores, begging to be fed, and we see the rich man that fared scrumptiously day by day. As we look at that and as we think about that, we're told that Lazarus died, and the angels, plural, carried him into the bosom of Abraham, which is kind of a euphemism for the Israelites to be gathered together with their people, with Abraham. It doesn't say how these angels carried Lazarus into the bosom of Abraham. We just get a general statement. But there is at least two. It doesn't say that it was an angel, but he was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. Do we all get a fiery chariot? I don't know. That's the way it was described by Elisha, who God allowed to witness the taking away. Obviously, Elisha's exit was a little bit different than ours would be. But nonetheless, when we look at this and we think about it, we can see that there are forces that exist on the other side that we do not always see and we do not always have the ability to understand. Another passage that we see is in the book of Kings, 2 Kings again, chapter 19. Beginning in verse 32, we find a situation where the king of Assyria came down to mock the king and the city of Jerusalem, to besiege it with the intent of taking it away captive. Assyria had taken and would take Israel captive, and so they're here surrounding the city. And as we come into verse 32, therefore thus saith the Lord concerning the king of Assyria, he shall not come into this city, nor shoot an arrow there, nor come before it with shield, nor cast a bank against it. As God is promising to them His protection, His defense, seeing all the hosts of Assyria surrounding the city, it would be a scary thing, a terrible thing. But God tells them that they're not even going to be able to shoot an arrow into the city. They're not going to build up some kind of ramp and bridge themselves over the walls, no matter how many soldiers they have. Now notice 34 says, for I will defend this city to save it for my own sake and for the servant David's sake. So God promises that He's going to defend, He's going to protect the city, and if necessary, which is apparent, He is going to go to war against the king of Assyria. Now, look at verse 35. And it came to pass that night, while the Assyrians were camped outside the city, preparing to advance on the city, that the angel of the Lord went down and smote in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when they arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses. 185,000 soldiers were destroyed by an angel, or the angel, singular, of the Lord in one night. They laid down with their plans. They were going to wake up to advance upon the city and to prove the superiority of the Assyrian army over those of Israel, and specifically the city of Jerusalem. But when the Israelites woke up the next morning, when the sun came up and those who were manning the watchtowers in Israel looked over the walls to where the soldiers of Assyria were encamped, they didn't see soldiers, they saw corpses. Now, not every one of the Assyrians were killed. It's interesting that God did not kill Sennacherib, the king of Assyria. He left him alone, he left him alive, and he returned back to his country and dwelled in the city of Nineveh. So he got to take the message back to his own people. We lost them. We lost practically all of them. 185,000 soldiers. We went to sleep, woke up next morning, and they were all dead. And it came to pass as he was worshiping in the house of Nisroch, his god, that Adramelech and Sharezer, his son, smote him with the sword, and they escaped into the land of Armenia, and his son reigned in his stead. So it's interesting that his life was saved and spared, and he returned to Nineveh only to be killed by his own sons. But it's not the fact that his sons killed him. That's not the important part. But here we have the angel of the Lord killing 185,000 in one night. You have to think about that. Think about how powerful an angel is. They may not be all-knowing, and they may not have been around like God from everlasting to everlasting. But it doesn't take a whole lot of them if it is God's plan to thwart the plans of others. Here we clearly see an example of God's divine providence coming to bear on the nation of Israel through, and He used this angel, this messenger, the one who was sent to do it. Now, we would think that if you're going up against an army of 185,000, you probably need several angels. But that's not what the book of Kings tells us. It tells us that if God really wants to impact a physical situation, if it's in His will, if it's, as He says here, it was for His name's sake and for David's, He wouldn't allow the city to be touched. And rather than send the host of heaven to defend the city, He sent the angel of the Lord to do that. When we look into the realm that we at least have had some insight unto, one of the angels by name, it's interesting, God does not share, for whatever reason, many of the names of the heavenly host. We just hear them referred to, as I've said before, as a young man in white, or two men dressed in white. As with Abraham, 3 were journeying up the road. 3 men. Abraham saw 3 men. Usually in the scriptures, the angel appears, and the angel, the messenger of God, brings whatever message that God has for the individual, or acts in a certain way on behalf of God, but we're never given their name. times. One of the things that people tend to do and have tended to do is to worship angels. Because angels are very powerful beings, and because to a mortal like us, locked in this mortal frame, and because one can get rid of 185,000 people in one night, we tend to think of them as, some type of super immortal being, and some people have been tempted to worship angels, to worship them and pay tribute and honor. And so we have to be careful about that. Angel worship is not allowed in the scriptures, and so we don't have very many names. It's interesting that the one we have, one of the names that we have, of course, is Michael, and he is referred to as the archangel, or the hierarchy, the upper angel. Now, whether that exists as a class or whether that's his personal office, I don't know, and it doesn't really say whether there are more archangels or not. But because these beings are so strong and they're seen, one of the examples we find in the Catholic Church is that many people wear St. Michael's medallion or necklace to protect them. When I was working with the police, many police officers, whether they were what we would think of as Protestants or Catholics, many of them wore the St. Michael medal. St. Michael is said to be the patron saint of soldiers and police officers. That's, again, traditions and things that the world say. But they rely on that, and many times people would even be desirous to pray. And especially the Catholic Church, people pray to the saints. St. Michael, protect us. And they're making prayers to this angel. So angels are very powerful. Michael is one of those who is spoke of in the scriptures. And he is and has played a prominent role in certain things. When we turn to the book of Jude, in Jude, the first chapter, and in verse 9, as Jude is speaking, he says, "Yet Michael, the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, durst not bring railing accusation, but said, the Lord rebuke thee." And so here we have an example, and this is based upon some teachings of the Jewish people. We don't have it in the scriptures other than mentioned here, but it is a Jewish custom or teaching that when Moses died, we're told in the scriptures that God buried him. That's what we're told at the death of Moses, that God buried him. But one of the teachings that was prevalent among the Jewish people is that God used Michael to bury him, or to take care of the burial of Moses. And in so doing, he was in basically a confrontation with the devil, whom we understand to likewise be a created being which God made, who, as we see here in these verses, even in the book of Jude, chose not to keep the place where God put them, but chose rather in rebellion to cast away the honor and the privilege of serving God, to be at war with God. And so here In Jude 1, we have a confrontation between Michael and the devil over the body of Moses. Now, it has been supposed by some that the devil wished to get a hold of the body of Moses, knowing that if he could return the body to the people of Israel or whatever, they would probably create a tomb and they would make pilgrimages there, and they would give tribute and honor to Moses and basically would be worshiping him. God chose not to disclose to the people of Israel where he buried Moses. And Jude says there was a contention between Michael and the devil over the body of Moses. So when we think about our adversary, I just want to put these things together. When Peter says your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion walketh about seeking whom he may devour, this is a being that is capable of going toe-to-toe with Michael. He may not win, but it doesn't keep him from going to battle. Now, if an angel can kill 185,000 people in one night to bring about the protection of God's people, and again, you have the devil willing to go toe-to-toe with Michael, you need to understand that your adversary, the devil, is not you. He's not me. We're locked into this mortal body. Now, we may, in the resurrection, as Jesus said, be like the angels of heaven. We will have a body like our Lord's glorious body. But we're not there yet. We're dealing with a being that was before we were ever created. When Jesus talks about the beginning of the world, and he talks about the devil in John 8 and verse 44, when he's talking to the leaders of Israel, he says, ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father ye shall do. And he says this about him. He was a murderer in the beginning, and abode not in the truth. That is, in the beginning of the world. By the time God created this world and those that are on it, the devil was already guilty of murder, spiritual murder, and who knows what all else he had done. But he abode not in the truth. Jesus says concerning the devil is that he is a liar. When he speaks a lie. And he speaks of his own self. For he is the father of lies. And another thing Jesus says about him in John 8:44 is, there is no truth in him. You understand why the devil is a worthy opponent, not just for you and I and tempting us, but he's willing to go against Michael and trying to contend with him. So what chance do we have? Except the fact that God puts limitations upon him. 1 Corinthians 10, we're told that God will not suffer us to be tempted above that which we're able. But with every temptation will make a way of escape that we are able to bear it. And this is part of keeping the devil on a chain, so to speak. He can go so far, but he can't go any further. It's up to you to get where he can bite you. And I've used this before, but the devil, in a way, is like a dog on a chain. If you know how far the chain will reach, and you can stand outside the reach of the dog, and providing the chain is strong enough, that dog can't do anything to you. He can bark and jump and growl and snarl and snap at you, but he can't do anything else. But if when you come up, he wags his little tail and he pants and he does not present himself as a threat, oh, cute little puppy, and you go over there to pet him and he takes your arm off, you did that. That one's on you. And the devil, while he has limitations, especially with us, James says we're drawn away of our own lusts and enticed. The devil tries to get us to come just a little closer, a little closer, a little closer. And when we come close enough, then he bites. And that idea of being drawn away, and think about someone who is in, let's just go back to the city of Jerusalem. They were in this walled city, a protected city. But if your enemies keep sticking their tongue out and mocking you and all, and you decide to open up the gate and charge out to defend your honor, they've goaded you into doing something that may very well cause you to lose the whole city. And that's what that's the language that Jude is using, being drawn away. We're in a safe place, but through the temptation of the devil, we will exit the safe place. We'll forsake the protection and find ourselves in a situation where we're toe-to-toe with the enemy. It's interesting that what Jude tells us, that when Michael was contending over the body of Moses, even Michael would not bring a railing accusation against the devil. He just said, "The Lord rebuke thee." And Jude puts that in the context, however, he says, but these are the wicked people who, in verse 10, but these speak evil of those things which they know not. But what they know naturally as brute beasts, in those things they corrupt themselves. And this is Jude talking about many of those teachers who are trying to draw people away from the faith which was once delivered unto the saints. So there is even though Michael we would think of as being in a higher position than the devil in God's order, you'd think God would smile more on Michael than he would on Satan, the devil. But Michael chooses not to go there. So here's the thing. Michael was contending, he was arguing against, but he doesn't let the devil pull him into doing something that he's going to regret, as he did many of the other angels that we see in the Scriptures. You've got to know when to draw the line. You've got to understand these things. So even Michael would not go and stoop down to the level of the devil and get involved in those things the devil was trying to get him involved in. In the book of Revelation chapter 12, when we're we have a picture that is given us by the writer, Revelation 12:7. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought against his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon that was cast out, the old serpent, called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world, he was cast out into the earth with his angels, were cast out, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ, for the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. The Revelation writer speaks of a battle, of a war that takes place. And Michael, and in this sense we find at least some evidence that Michael has, he may not be the only one, but he had his angels. And there was a war in heaven, not on earth. Michael and his angels were contending with the devil and his angels. And they were cast out, the one who accused the brethren day and night before God. In the book of Job, we've studied Job before, but in Job, the first chapter, we're told there that there was a day when the sons of God, which we understand to be the angels, came before God and were told that God asked him, where do you come from, or what are you doing here? And the devil before God says, I'm here to give thanks for your allowing me to walk to and fro across the whole face of the earth. And God said, Hast thou considered my servant Job? You haven't got them all yet. Don't get too proud. And then we see the accuser of the brethren, the one who brings up accusations. He says, Does Job fear God for naught? Does God fear you for naught, or does Job fear you for naught? You put a hedge around him. You protect him. Why wouldn't he serve you? You've blessed him with all these things, and you put a hedge of protection around him. You know, and so the devil begins this conversation with God, and it's an accusation. His accusation is Job really doesn't care about God more than what God is capable of doing for him. And that ends up in a situation where God turns Job's life over to the devil. And the whole book of Job begins that process of Job first losing his family, and then he loses his animals, and then he loses his health, and then he has some miserable friends that show up to comfort him, and they are pretty miserable. And I don't mean to be too funny about it. I've heard preachers say it as well as comedians, but it's interesting. God took away Job, or Satan took away Job's children, but left him his wife. Now, you got to figure this. He's being tempted. And so he takes away the children that he loves, but he leaves him his wife. And after a while, his wife even starts ragging on him. She says, basically, why don't you just curse God and die? There's a wife every man wants. So Miss Job wasn't happy with him. So He's dwelling in a house with an angry woman that just as soon seemed dead as alive. And so the devil takes control of his life and tries to win a victory. He has accused him and he's done a lot of things. And we just get a little snippet of that in the scriptures. But as much as Michael seeks and his angels to do the will of God, the serpent and his angels seek to destroy and to defame, profane, and accuse the people of God. And it's interesting that the devil wasted no time after the creation of the man and the woman. He didn't waste a lot of time. While they were still in the garden, the serpent appears to the woman. And he begins his manipulations, his trickery. They're there and he begins, "Yea, hath God not said that you may eat of all the trees of the garden?" Didn't God tell you could eat them all? And Eve says, well, we can eat all except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We were told that we're not to touch it or eat it lest we die. And then he misquotes God. God had said, "Thou shalt surely die." And the devil says, "You shall not surely die." And then he lies straight out. God knows in the day that you eat thereof, ye shall be like gods, knowing good from evil. The devil tries to convince Mother Eve that God is trying to keep from them something which is good. God has created them, but he doesn't want them to be like him. Now see, that's another lie, because God created man in his image. He created a male and female. But part of the lie is that the devil was saying God is holding back things. So he's basically twisting things up, that God doesn't want you to be like him. He may say he made you in his image, but he knows the day you eat of that tree, you're going to be like him. Well, shouldn't we already be in the image of God? And so the devil starts twisting all kinds of things. The fruit, which is good for the eye, and the smell and all this, it's good to the senses. And he pulls her, he draws her from a realm of living in a safety of God. She makes all the choices. Notice the devil never touches her, so far as we know. Everything she did because she wanted to do it. She could have said no at any point. She could have went back to her husband. After we do these things, after the devil gets an advantage over us, sometimes it's easy for us to sit back down and say, well, we should have done this or we should have done that. But it's hard sometimes in the heat of the battle to make the good decisions. Again, we have Michael, the archangel, we have the devil, we have the angels that are under the direction of Michael, and those who have given their allegiance to the devil. And as Paul says, we're not just struggling against flesh and blood, but we're struggling against spiritual wickedness in heavenly places. The war is much bigger than us. We don't always have the ability to peer through and see what's going on in the other side. But Paul says, remember, it's not just about flesh and blood. It's not just a war between man and man, mankind and mankind. But the war is a spiritual one, being fought between two opposing armies. Now, why that war continues and why God allows it, I don't have an explanation for that, and so far as I know, the Scriptures doesn't give one. But I do know that there is a time coming when the devil and his angels will be judged, and they will be sent into an everlasting punishment prepared for them. But those who are faithful to God will receive a place in heaven. If you're here today and you're not a child of God, before you is the opportunity, believing in Jesus Christ as a Son of God, to repent of your sin, confess your belief, be baptized into Christ, or as a child of God, not walking where you ought to be, not doing the things that you should be, through repentance and prayer, you can find reconciliation.
In closing this evening, we wish to thank you again for spending your time in study with us. We hope the lesson has been uplifting and motivational. We encourage you to return again for our next lesson. Until then, may we invite you to visit our website. You will find many study opportunities. Our resource page has links to the Gospel Broadcasting Network, a 24/7 station with many great Christian programs and speakers. In Search of the Lord's Way, with Brother Phil Sanders. We have 2 links for Bibles and downloadable software. If you are looking to really expand your knowledge, perhaps you might like to try World Video Bible School, a college-level learning site free of charge. So, until next time, may God bless and keep you in His care as we walk together in His truth. And remember, as always, the Churches of Christ salute you.